Good evening, and I welcome you to your transformative program, Politics and Beyond. My name is Emmanuel Jr., the Chief Crusader Against Corruption here in Ghana. Last week, we started a conversation on the energy sector, and so our focus has been on the energy for a period of time now. Moving into the future, we'll still be doing a bit more on the energy, knowing very well how important the energy sector is to us all. Over the past decade, Ghana's energy landscape has expanded rapidly, and there's no two ways about that, with new power plants and major investments. But behind the growth is a financial storm. It's a storm that a lot of people are not averting their minds to. It's a storm that gradually, if we are not taking a particular look at it or attention to it, it may end up becoming a tsunami, as others may call it. Do you know that currently Ghana owes over $2.5 billion, not cedis, billion dollars to independent power producers and suppliers? Much of this is tied to long-term contracts, some of which require payments whether or not the power is used. And poor revenue collection has also been one of the things we've been talking about over the past period. A lot of times you hear people talking about it. Technical losses is one of the things also. And the system seriously is under pressure. There has been instances where over the past period, you will hear people talking about doomsday coming back, whether or not it has come back, whether or not it is doomed to maintain, as someone came to introduce to us, or it is just doom, whatever. You have no idea. But the fact is, Ghana's energy sector is not as good as we all expect it to be. And that is why this evening we are going to have a conversation on the power and debts. Power and debt, unpacking Ghana's 2.5 billion energy crisis. As always, you can get interactive with us on this particular topic using our social media handles, including the WhatsApp line that we have on the screen. But what is important that you need to realize is that behind current Ghana's power sector is a storm. I may probably be using the word storm madly, but it is probably the fact that the reality may even suggest that it goes beyond a storm. We have a financial storm. And that's why this evening, I am very, very happy that we have a very important person to help us discuss this. We are going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, I'll introduce the guest to you, and we'll go straight into the conversation. Stay tuned.
Ifo kra na menyisika edia ye mefui.
Ehinfa pa na menya bosia edia tre medwuma yimu.
Kai kra mabre miye bosia ato taxi foforo. Suhum Rural Bank.
Suhum Rural Bank.
Yema kwa baba Suhum Rural Bank. Ye won hyehyɛ ahodo bi te sɛ dwadifo abosia, ekukuro bosia, susu account, ene da so wɔ hɔ savings account, me bada chain savings account, ene de akeka ho. Suhum Rural Bank was 03422919896. Na won so wetumi aka sɛ
Suhum Rural Bank. Ama ene mayeka ona.
Suhum Rural Bank. Enti me pa minie.
Me damwase.
Suhum Rural Bank, growing our heritage.
The average human body mass should have at least 60% water for optimal performance in any physical or mental exercise. We can help you maintain it naturally. X Natural Mineral Water. Simply natural For bulk purchase, call 0596 273 546 or 0596 273 547. This advert is FDA approved.
Welcome back. I'm still your host, Emmanuel Wilson Jr. And as I indicated before we went on break, we are going to unpack Ghana's $2.5 billion energy crisis or debt that we have. And this evening, as I said earlier, he is not a stranger to this platform. We've had him before, and we are privileged to have him again. When it comes to energy, you cannot bypass him. When it comes to matters of energy, to have a straight, honest conversation devoid of partisanship, having at the back of your mind that we are discussing Ghana and protecting the interests of Ghana, you cannot bypass him. And I'm making reference to a man I refer to as my uncle, a man who has been a former minister in the energy sector, a former member of parliament, an expert, more than an expert when it comes to the energy sector. And I'm making reference to Dr. Kwabena Donko. Doc, welcome to Politics and Beyond.
Thank you.
It's so great to see you.
My pleasure.
How has life been outside politics? I mean, not politics, but outside parliament, yes.
Well, especially in the last 2 days or so, I've been very happy.
Really?
Yes, because
has been
my team won.
Making reference to?
The President's Cup.
Oh, Kotoko. I'm sure the how do you call it? The supporters of Accra House of Folk will not be so happy to hear this. But I mean, that's the reality. In fact, Kotoko is my team also. I'm not so much into football, but I have always said that Kotoko is my team. So yeah, we congratulate them for that. At least there's something to make you happy. Yes. This past 2 days. But let me ask you, the NDC is in power. The question is, how do we, in terms of assessing, if you are assessing, what will be your assessment so far?
So far, so good, but there's still a lot of work to be done. The most important achievement so far is our stabilizing the macroeconomy.
Right.
And for me, that is key. Not only has the indicators, the macro numbers turned positive, but also the psychology of the people. Economics is based also on psychology.
Yeah.
They believe that we're doing the right thing.
That's right.
They believe that we've turned the corner. They believe that things are on track.
That's right.
So you cannot divorce economics from confidence or psychology.
That's true.
And under the leadership of the finance minister and his team, we are chalking some success there. The question is sustainability.
That's right.
And then the structural and institutional reforms that we must, as of necessity, carry out.
What about appointments? Because truly there has been instances where you get the opportunity of interacting with party members, especially the ones we refer to as foot soldiers. And it looks like a lot of people are not happy.
Yes, it's understandable. It's understandable from the level we sank. Remember, at a point, we had over 120 ministers and deputy ministers. And
That's
so
right.
the expectation is that we will do same.
Yeah.
Presidential staffers were in their hundreds.
In fact, I think they were nearing 1,000 or so, yes.
And so the expectation was also that we will do same and then have a lot more openings for party apparatchiks.
Exactly.
But I have always been a believer, and I've been very firm on this, and probably not too many party people are happy with me, that there must be a clear distinction between the NDC and the MPP. If we are to replicate all that the MPP did, then there's no need for having an NDC.
That's true.
There must be daylight between the NDC and the MPP.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you go to the base of the party, the arguments are that MPP did this, and so we must do same.
Yeah.
I have been an activist since 82.
Right. Wow.
In fact, in 1983, thereabout, I was the youngest National Committee member.
National?
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay.
When I was made a member of the Confiscated Assets Committee.
Right.
I've been with the PNDC Secretariat, I've been with the Castle Information Bureau, etc., etc. The interim coordinating committee of PDCs and WDCs in the very early days in the projects and programs. So I understand the feelings of the base.
Right.
If you go to Yeji, if you go to Paramo, if you go to Zamrama in Chamba, all they see is what MPP supporters did or gained. And therefore it swells up.
Yeah.
So when you tell them that, look, we cannot do same, it doesn't sink in too well.
That's true.
And for NDC, as a social democratic party, as a nationalist party, the interests of Ghana must always take precedence over the party. And I'm very clear about that. And for me as an individual, my hierarchy is simple: Ghana, party, self.
Ghana comes before party, before yourself.
Yes, party comes before self. Right. And so I can understand, first of all, the numbers have been constricted in the interest of efficiency, in the interest of the national economy, in the interest of good governance. And so that will be an issue. There are fewer jobs for the boys.
That's true.
And then again, will we say only NDC supporters fought this election? I'm of the opinion that no.
Yeah.
The process to unseat MPP had a certain national character.
Sure.
So you had people from some of the other parties, even at the polling stations, collaborating with our agents.
Yeah.
And so we cannot democratize the process of winning an election and then monopolize appointments.
Right. That's a powerful word. You cannot democratize the process and then monopolize the appointments. It will not be good. I mean, it will not be. Okay, Doc. So, I mean, that's fair. That's very fair. Let's go into the energy sector. We currently have about $2.5 billion as a debt. Ghana's energy sector. I'm going to ask you a simple question. How did we get here? What were the key factors that brought us to where we are?
Essentially, our history played a part. Our history played a part. Remember when the Ekosombo Dam was constructed, the cost of the dam, the cost of the loan, financing the loan, etc., was basically borne by our power sales to Valco. That underpinned at that time
Cool.
And so then we also had power sales to Togo and Benin. And therefore, VRE as an organization had very reliable sources of finance because the power sales to Kaiser's Valco was seen as an export.
Okay.
And so there was an export base that supported the sector. And because it was hydro, with a small population there, and hydro is one of the cheapest form of generation. Therefore, the cost of generation, the cost of distribution, etc., was low. And so we were brought up on low power in terms of cost, in terms of the economics.
If you say brought up on low power, does it mean the consumers were made to pay very, very affordable?
Yes.
Okay, that's right.
Because of one, our source of generation, and two, because of the contracts we had.
Okay.
The export, both to Valco, Togo, Benin, could pay for the operations of VRA and leave a surplus.
Right.
So that is why I say our history.
Okay.
So we're brought up on low power. And then the Nkrumah's government also had a certain socialist orientation, which permeated the body politic. That even when the Busia government of the Progress Party came in, those characteristics of a socialist, populist orientation still stayed.
Right.
And it stayed up to today. If you go to our neighboring countries, especially Cote d'Ivoire and Togo, our immediate neighborhoods, the average Ivorian consumes less power than the average Ghanaian.
How is it so? Is it in terms of gadgets that are used?
Gadgets, attitude.
Okay.
Because they were brought up on relatively expensive power.
Okay, I get it.
Yes. So that is part of the problem. Then we transited into the era beginning in the 90s of not having enough cheap hydropower. And therefore, we went into thermal generation. Thermal generation is expensive.
Okay.
Because apart from the equipment, you also have to buy fuel.
Very true.
With hydro, apart from the equipment, the fuel for the hydro is the water, and you don't buy.
Okay.
Water turns the turbines.
That's true.
But with thermal, apart from the machines, the equipment, you have to buy fuel.
To move the machine.
Yes, the machines. And so fuel is the single most expensive cost center in operating a thermal plant.
Okay.
So we moved into the era of thermal.
Right.
Initially, with TICO in Takoradi and TAPCO, the balance, the mix, the generation mix was still hydro dominated. And so the average cost was positively impacted by hydro.
Right.
But today, hydro accounts for less than 40%.
Less than
40% of generation is hydro. And therefore, the impact on the average cost or the cost per unit of running thermal with its fuel component raises the average cost. In other jurisdictions, they even run purely on thermal.
Okay. That should be expensive.
When you are operating an expensive system, then your efficiency and cost control must be very high. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, the efficiency of our state utilities, particularly ECG and NETCO,
Yeah.
is nothing to write home about. So as production cost rises per kilowatt hour because of the increasing use of thermal,
Yeah.
we are not driving down cost through efficiency gains.
Okay. Okay.
And so there's no equilibrium.
That's right.
You have increasing legitimate generating costs as well as increasing inefficiency.
Inefficiency. But the challenge here for me is that we have less than 40% coming from hydro.
Yes.
Hydro is relatively cheaper compared to thermal.
I mean, legacy hydro. Let me make the distinction.
Okay.
Legacy
What's
hydro.
the difference between that?
By legacy hydro,
Yes.
I'm referring to Akosombo and Pong.
Okay.
Bui is expensive.
Yeah.
Bui is
Okay.
as expensive as the thermal plant because it's a picking plant.
So what if Akosombo and Pong,
Yeah.
the ones you refer to as legacy hydro, they are cheaper
Yes.
in terms of generation. Why can't we replicate same? Develop it, expand it, make it, like 80% instead of less than 40%?
Well, we have exhausted our hydro potential as a nation.
Okay.
In John Mahama and Atta Mills' term,
Yeah.
I was then a deputy minister. We explored the possibility of damming some of our rivers, Pra, Ofin, etc.
Yeah.
In fact, VRE did some feasibility studies.
Okay.
And then we believed if we did smaller dams, what we call run of the river, cascading, we could generate electricity. It will be higher than Akosombo and Pong, but at least it will probably be lower than thermal. What has happened to our water bodies?
Galamsey has taken over.
Can we imagine damming River Pra now?
That's right.
The impact of chemicals on the turbines.
It will not survive. It will not survive. Yeah.
So other than cost, there is also the menace of Galamsey, the impact of Galamsey on water bodies. The last administration, whilst I was in Parliament, also looked at Palugu. At that time, we're looking at about 50 megawatts, the Palugu dam.
Okay.
The dam on its own will not be financially viable. And that was why it was meant to be an integrated hydro-agricultural project. Because if we are going to generate 50 megawatts at that cost, the average cost of generation will be high. And so if we're to pay that average cost, we must have some other benefit in the food of irrigation, food security, that then could complement and make it. But today, I believe I was a member of the NDC energy team in opposition. In fact, I chaired the power subcommittee.
Okay. In relation to the manifesto or in Parliament?
No.
Manifesto.
Manifesto.
Development,
Yeah, manifesto. And our team worked since we've been working since 2018.
Okay.
That core team. Yes. Our proposal, which is on the table now, is to also add solar to the hydro.
Yeah.
If we did solar, hydro, and then the irrigation, will bring the cost down. And then also explore new technologies in terms of even the hydro, new technologies that will be more efficient, more cost efficient.
Right.
So that is about the viable, immediately viable hydro that we can do.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
I want us to dwell just 1 or 2 more minutes on how we got here. And I'm happy you've talked about the history of it.
Okay, let me just sum up in one word. We are under recovering cost.
We are under recovering cost.
Yes.
How does this, first off, what is this agreement of take or pay? What does it mean? And how does it contribute to the debt?
Take or pay should not contribute to the debt. It's just our mismanagement of the process. Look, it costs about $500 million to put up a 330 megawatt thermal plant. Which investor, especially in a developing country context, will sink $550 million in your country without a guarantee that you will buy the power?
Right. Right.
Will you do that?
No. Not at all.
And so for most developing countries, it's standard to do take or pay contract. That commits the country.
Yeah.
And then and enables the investor to raise money. Look, GE has a plant here in partnership with LA Power.
Okay.
Even GE, almighty GE, will never use equity to set up a plant. It's the norm is 30% equity, 70% loan.
Right.
So no bank will give you a loan of $400 million if there is no firm order, purchase order, that the power, there's no firm offtake contract. How do you establish a firm offtake contract? You guarantee to buy the power.
Right.
So that is not the issue. The issue is how we manage that power. The availability of power is only one side of the coin. The other coin is the management. How do you sell it? How do you manage your revenue flows? For example, ECG loses about 30% of the power they purchase in terms of accounting. If you buy 100 units, whether from IPPs, from VRA, and by the time the consumer pays for it, they're only paying for 70 units. And if your markup, your margin, is 10%, you have a 20% hole. And that is why we say we are under recovering cost. You are paying 10 cedis and you are selling for 7 cedis. We are essentially under recovering cost. So that is the real thrust of the issue. Unfortunately, for political and other convenience, it is easy to pin, where is take or pay. For the 8 years of the Nadu administration, even when they renegotiated lapsed agreements, such as the AXA agreement that had lapsed, they will still take or pay.
That's interesting.
Yes, it's simple. You see, unfortunately, we've gotten into a political theater that discourages critical thinking.
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Our politics does not encourage critical thinking. And that is why a number of our policies are not thought through. Once the headline is enough to catch attention, bring votes, that's okay. We don't think through the consequences at the micro level, not at the macro. The management even of the process, the impacts, the possible negative impacts. How do we counterbalance those negative impacts? Oh, this one, the base will not be happy. Oh, this one, the grassroots will not be happy. Oh, this one, the people will not be happy. A government that only wants to please the people will always be a short-term government. And that is why we say leadership is lonely. A leader may be surrounded by thousands of people, but he's a very lonely person. Because the burden of leadership involves thinking beyond the immediate.
That's great.
The short term and the long term are not always synchronized. They can be short-term difficulties, but long-term benefits. And with our 4-year electoral cycle, do you have the courage to sacrifice the short term for the long term?
That is a deep question that, honestly, I believe that if you should assemble about 10 politicians, 9.5 out of the 10 will tell you that with the cycle that we have, they are not willing, even for a second, to sacrifice the long-term benefits. I mean, sacrifice the short-term for the long-term benefits. Because whether we like it or not, after just 2-3 years, we are going back into an election era and season. And so the politician's number one interest is to ensure that he wins an election, and not necessarily to govern or to make, the system a bigger one or a better one. I have always advocated for some level of reforms when it comes to our electoral system and cycle, but I'm sure that will be for another day. I am happy, Doc, that you talked about some of the losses happening, especially with ECG, where ECG will purchase about 100 and end up receiving about 70. And so that gap accrues, and gradually it adds up to the 2.5 billion that we are talking about today.
That is a factor.
Right.
Let me also bring the second factor. The second factor I put squarely at the door of Bank of Ghana, the central bank.
Okay.
The central bank has responsibility for monetary policy.
Right.
Not the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance has responsibility for fiscal policy. So when the central bank, through its negligence, incompetence, inefficiency, short-sightedness, allows the currency to devalue, to deteriorate to the level to which our currency was deteriorating, knowing that your payables, your contracts are dollar denominated, and your receivables are CD denominated, and you mismanage the currency to the level we saw, it will create a mismatch.
So Bank of Ghana has a significant role to play.
Absolutely.
As far as our 2.5 billion debt is concerned.
Yes.
But the Bank of Ghana, ECG, both do. I want us to dwell a bit on the bank ECG. Over the past years, we've been...
Add NETCO to ECG, because we are unfair to ECG. There are two state distributors in Ghana. One is responsible for about 67% of the land mass of Ghana.
And which one is that? NETCO.
Yes.
Oh, so NETCO is even above or bigger in terms of territorial.
Yes. And then one has a smaller. But the bigger, in terms of territorial, only produces or uses about 10% of what the smaller does. But the Tema area alone consumes more power than 67% of the country, the NETCO area. So again, that is the dynamics.
Well, so then it is so very fair to still dwell a bit more on ECG because the other one
in terms of numbers is the bigger one.
Is the bigger one.
Yes.
So why is it that over the past years we've heard this story over and over? And honestly, I am tired, and I'm sure a lot of people are tired of ECG's inability to collect revenue. ECG collecting revenue, and then half of it goes into the drain. ECG's inability to manage and ensure that the supply is exactly what they are getting value for. So that in the process, and they are quick to refer to illegal connections and all those things. If ECG is not up to task, why do we still have ECG?
In my opinion, there are a number of factors. Some of ECG's challenges can be resolved by technology.
Right.
Unfortunately, technology involves investment. Who are the shareholders of ECG? ECG today cannot borrow on its balance sheet.
Why?
Which bank?
It's not attractive.
Absolutely. Which bank? The last figures I have about ECG's profitability was 2023. I haven't seen the 2024. I doubt whether the 2024 audited accounts are out. ECG made a loss of about 10.2 billion.
10.2
billion cedis.
That was an annual one.
Yes. But, and that is where I brought in Bank of Ghana again.
Right.
8.2 billion of this 10.2 billion loss is attributable to exchange losses.
Oh.
Currency losses.
Currency losses. Oh. And I understand that perfectly. Yeah.
So which bank will lend money to ECG on its balance sheet?
Yeah.
Don't also forget ECG is a limited liability company.
That's true. That's true.
And therefore, if the balance sheet of the entity is weak, it's not attractive, there is the need for equity injection. Who is the shareholder? So who must put in more money? That is one. And two, and that is why I'm very cautious about ECG debt. ECG debt keeps moving. Or I won't say energy sector, our power sector, because again, the energy sector has two legs.
Right.
The petroleum or oil and gas and power.
Power, sure.
Yes, petroleum has its own difficult single baby, Temoy refinery. But on the whole, the petroleum sector, if you isolate Temoy refinery, is profitable.
Right.
So this is the power sector. If you tell me the power sector debt is $2.5 billion today, at the end of August, at the end of September, it will be 2.5 plus.
That's right.
Because the debt is growing on a monthly basis because we are under recovering costs.
No matter what we do, we'll always be behind.
We are under recovery until we tackle the revenue side. And tackling the revenue side will include uncomfortable decisions.
Right.
In corporate governance. How do we appoint boards? How do we appoint chief executives? How do we appoint top management? Are their contracts or the terms of employment related to productivity. And that is a challenge for our state-owned enterprises. There's no link between remuneration and performance.
That's right.
And I've said it elsewhere that if I had my own way, I would pay the chief executive of ECG maybe 20,000 cedis a month.
Why?
And then put in a package, performance-based. I don't mind if he earns even 80,000 a month if he delivers. To make it 100,000, I will support that.
I agree.
In our SOEs, we have loss-making chief executives on very high-level salaries. As well, not just the chief executive, let me be fair, the management. Bank of Ghana is a good example. For the last 2-3 years, they've turned out, even though profit is not the sole motive for having the Bank of Ghana, because the Bank of Ghana plays a dual role. In role one, it is a regulator. And regulation is not about profit making. But in role two, is the bank to government and the bank of last resort. In that role, it has to make profits. And so, when it comes to corporate governance, it's a major issue. Appointment is an issue. Then attitudes. I've always said that it doesn't matter how you come in. Once you come in, justify your stay.
That's right.
So apart from the problem, the challenge of how people are appointed, there's the bigger challenge of performance.
Very true.
The bigger challenges of performance. You will find a state-owned commercial entity, and for 5 years, they've not published accounts. The accounts have not been audited. And we seem to be okay. When you raise those issues, you are the bad person. And so, back to our energy sector debt, we will have to do what we'll call business process reengineering. Look at, if we are buying 10 units, how do we lose 3 units on the way? You've gone to the market, bought 10x. Before you get home, you've lost 3. So there is an urgent need to re-engineer. Some of the losses are technical. The technical losses, when you have obsolete equipment, they are not as efficient.
I agree.
So capital injection will take care of that. But the commercial losses are either deliberate, they arise out of, I'm on television, so I've almost said stupidity, but I haven't said it.
I know you haven't said it. Nobody even heard that.
Arise of petty-mindedness.
I agree.
Because half of the illegal connections, I can tell you an authority, ECG workers or ECG contractors are involved.
That's right.
And that is why I say it's petty-minded. The 2,000 you receive for aiding and abetting,
which will not even last you more than a week or 2,
undermines the long-term sustainability of you having a job.
I agree.
That's why I say it's petty-minded. So we must have the courage to say that, look, enough is enough. Let me give you an example. PDS.
I was going to come there,
as wrongly structured as it was, as fraudulently structured as it was, for the short time PDS was in charge, fault reporting improved, revenue collection improved. Did the Filipinos bring in any new managing director? No. The managing director and the PDS, who's a former managing Hutchins, Reverend Hutchins, a former managing director of ECG. The workers they used were still ECG staff. But it's the mindset and the attitude. And we have the same, even in education.
Yeah.
Go to our private schools. In fact, the teachers in public schools are more qualified than teachers in private schools. And yet the private schools do better. It is supervision. The difference is supervision. Shareholder interest and then the interest of management, especially middle-level management. So if we cannot fix it, we may have to break it up to reconstruct. I'm a believer in public ownership.
Right.
I was a young pioneer.
Excellent.
I'm a believer in public ownership. Indeed, if you look at the 7-year development plan of Kwame Nkrumah, of blessed memory, the 7-year development plan had a provision that when the state enterprises mature, they could be offloaded to Ghanaians through a stock exchange flotation. Even then.
Oh, okay.
And so we should look at putting some of these entities to the discipline of the stock exchange. But the stock exchange will not accept you if you don't have at least a 3-year good balance sheet. So we can maintain the ownership of ECG as state-owned.
Right.
But operations and management, let's bring in private sector practices. Let's look at concessions again. If we have 10, 20 concessions across the country, you have the concession, you provide a bank guarantee, work the system, collect revenue, and then you have a percentage. We'll have to do something different.
Am I getting the impression that you're expecting us, or you are making a proposal that we can go into a private-public partnership
I won't call it private partnership. You see, already ECG uses contractors.
Exactly.
They have subcontractors.
Sure.
So why don't we enhance and deepen that to even include management? You and I, as the Ghanaian state, will still own the company. So we are not diluting equity or shareholding.
Okay. So the management.
The management.
The operational part of it.
The operational part of it. We have tried this public sector, today public utilities workers say this, tomorrow the senior staff says this. We'll still own the company. But as owners of the company, we also have to put equity into it. Yes.
I agree.
But management, etc., let's bring in private sector management or introduce private sector management practices.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because we cannot continue.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense. It does. I agree. Let's look at another question, which I'm sure is of interest to all of us, including my viewers. Who pays the price? Because you see, today I am on prepaid. You're on prepaid. We purchase, we pay even before services are rendered to us. And yet, after payments, we are not even sure whether we are going to enjoy to the fullest the services that we have prepaid for. There can be doomsday at any time. And over the past period, places have been experiencing it and all that.
That is outages.
Yes.
I just want to be clear.
Okay.
We are speaking the same language.
Okay, so outages. We call it doomsday because that is what we've been introduced to.
You see, I am cautious when it comes to that word.
Okay.
Because outages are different from load shedding. And that word does not distinguish between
the two, right?
Load shedding arises out of a generation deficit.
Sure.
And therefore you ration. But that is not what we have now.
The outages.
Yes, now
what does that outages. One mean?
Outages, look, your local transformer can be faulty. And therefore it gives way. And so that locality will experience darkness and outage.
So we can call it Doom CSA.
No. Your box supply point.
Yes.
A major transformer there can blow. And therefore you have that the area that the box supply point covers. If we had enough infrastructure, once one box supply point goes off, the load can be transferred to another box supply point. But that presupposes you have capacity.
Yeah.
And so there is that. And then there is obsolete equipment, the question of obsolete equipment.
I agree.
When your equipment, in fact, where I come from, Yeji, under Netco, look, anytime it threatens to rain seriously, you are worried that you have outages because the system will trip.
In fact, we used to have same. I don't know of now, but for a while we were having same even under ECG.
Yes, the system will trip because of absolute weak equipment. We need to reinforce equipment. In the Netco area, Kratches, Salaga, Pandai, you can have, on average, you are lucky if you don't have an outage 5 times a day.
Wow.
Because there's a single line, 7 Kitekrache from Yendi, all the way to Pandai, to Salaga. So the minister has directed a second line is being strung, hopefully, to take up some of the load. We have a similar thing in the Atebubu Kwame Dansu Yeji area. And that is not because we are load shedding.
Okay.
Just operational
challenges. And hitches. Right.
Poor equipment, old lines, worker attitude, etc.
Almost all the things you've mentioned, none of it has to do with the consumer. So the question I'm asking is, and that was what I was driving at earlier on, is that, do you think it is fair to have the consumer burdened for crises that they did not contribute to?
The legitimate consumer, no.
Legitimate, that's
yes, the legitimate
consumer, yes.
Because the thief of a consumer is also part of the problem.
Definitely, that's true.
Yeah, and again, then the question is regulatory bodies.
Sure.
How strong are our regulatory bodies to enforce compliance?
Right.
Because the regulator protects the public good, protects consumers, protects the industry, and protects the national interest.
Right.
How strong is the regulator? And that is why in all, I almost said in all sense, in more conscious jurisdictions,
right,
regulators are independent in their regulatory role. So that they can stand up to even governments if the challenge is coming from governments.
Right.
And so when I see a regulator that is loved by all, I get worried. Because by the definition of your word, you are a policeman.
Exactly. Which entity does the regulation?
For electricity is the
Yeah.
PURC, Public Utilities
PURC.
Regulatory Commission.
Are they doing a good work?
They are the again, that is the challenge. And again, the NDC Energy Committee in opposition
Yes.
proposed the merger
Yeah.
of the PURC and the Energy Commission
Okay.
in our manifesto.
Okay.
Proposed. Because we have PURC as the economic regulator.
Yeah.
And we have Energy Commission as the technical regulator of the electricity sector.
They shouldn't be seen as two entities. Because it moves hand in hand. They shouldn't be
Precisely.
seen as two entities.
So where is the dividing line between technical
Exactly. The
and
economic.
economic? And that was why we proposed. So we have to take a second look
Yeah.
at even our governance, our institutional arrangements. Have an enhanced private sector participation, but have a robust regulatory regime to protect interests of consumers and industry. You see, the regulator is also to protect the industry.
Right.
Because if the regulator sides too much with the consumer,
Yeah.
and the revenue flow for industry becomes compromised, then it will be like the chicken and egg situation.
That's true. That is really true. There's one question which I'll reserve for the very last lap of this interview. But just some few days back, there was a launch of a 24-hour economy as a policy or document. It was launched. Looking at the current energy sector, because you cannot have a 24-hour economy without energy, without power. The current situation, even in this so-called 8-hour economy, we are struggling. Do you think the 24-hour economy has come at the right time?
Yes, there's never a better time to start than now.
Okay.
There's never a better time. Because there will always be something if you keep on procrastinating. It was a manifesto commitment.
Yeah.
The people bought into it. And therefore, I rather you start in imperfection.
Right.
Than wait for the perfect moment to start.
Right.
So, yes, then it is good. What we have to do, in my opinion, is that it should be in installments. The whole economy cannot start 24 hours simultaneously. Which are the critical areas? Let's take industry.
Yeah.
Let's take factories.
Right.
What can we do to enable our factories run 3 shifts instead of 1? Or 2 instead of 1.
Yeah.
And where they have 2, 3 instead of 2.
Yeah.
It will involve supply chain management because the raw materials must be there.
Exactly.
It will involve scheduling. Instead of having 500 workers go in and half are idle, can we put them into teams so that whilst you are off, this other team is working, so that throughout the 24 hours, somebody jokingly said with the NDC majority in parliament, why don't they start so that some will go in the morning and some will go in the afternoon? So it's about scheduling.
Yeah.
And then prioritization. I was extremely glad when the president mentioned the Volta Basin Corridor project. If we prioritize that, we should be able to move at least 30% of cargo off our roads onto the lake.
Into the lake, right.
All the way to Yape. And so the plan is to build a port at Yape and then at Bupe.
Right.
So again, we can, but it's going to take hard work. It's going to take critical thinking. You see, the policy is there. The big idea is there.
Yeah.
It is not the president or even ministers.
Right.
They must be critical thinkers behind the scenes to work the mechanics. And that is where we often fail.
Right.
The president or a leader is a visioneer. The transforming the vision into everyday activity is not done by the visioneer.
The visioneer, right.
The team.
That's right.
The team must be as committed, if not even more committed,
right,
even than the visioneer, in making it work. Do we have the intellectual ability? Do we have the passion? Do we have the drive? Because you will meet obstacles.
Sure.
You will receive knocks. But if you have the passion, if you have the determination, and if you have the know-how, the intellectual ability, ultimately, success will be chalked.
That's right.
When Nkrumah initiated the Akosombo Dam, they said it was impossible. It couldn't be done.
Exactly.
So again, I would humbly suggest that we get a team of doers. They may not have the finesse. There are tasks that you need crazy people, crazy in quotes, to push through. The people may be against you, but when the fruits begin to be seen, it's, this was what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But initially you receive resistance. But be clear in your mind that it is in the national interest. Be clear in your mind it is not for personal aggrandizement. Be clear in your mind that you face obstacles, but you are prepared. So we can. We absolutely can. But it has to be in installments.
Right.
By sectors.
Right. Right. Maybe my last but one question, still on the, now that we've talked a bit about the 24-hour economy, I'm also a bit more interested in the moving forward, the energy sector. Look, all the things you've talked about, and for me, I'm really struck by the reality. The reality is that we are not paying realistic tasks. How do you call it? Bills. Is that the impression?
It is only a part of it.
A part of it.
Because you see, no matter the tariff, even if they double the tariff today, and we are still losing 30%, we are still inefficient, we'll come out with about the same. So the two must go hand in hand. There must be efficiency gains. And the efficiency gains must come through cost cutting.
Right.
Legitimate cost cutting. There's still too much fat. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When I was minister, I visited the ECG warehouse in Kumasi, the industrial area.
Right.
Ashanti region then had two regions, Ashanti region A, Ashanti region B.
Okay.
ECG decided to build two warehouses on the same plot, compound, each with a filling station, fuel filling station, one for Ashanti region A, one for Ashanti region B. So I got there and then I asked them, that what is the occupancy rate?
Exactly. Because that is, in fact, the basic thing to ask.
What is the occupancy rate of each warehouse? And it was abysmal. So could one warehouse handle the two regions? And in Tree, oh, so why build two?
Waste of money, resources.
ECG, how many vehicles do you have in Ashanti region A and B that you need two filling stations?
Exactly.
So too many of our decisions in this country are procurement led.
I agree.
Too many of our decisions.
Because that is where we can get all the cuts, and that is where the corruption and all those things
are procurement led.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, let me say this controversial thing again. Part of the blame goes to the electorate. Oh, this man came and he did it.
Yeah.
He built this. He introduced this.
Yeah.
We never follow up. How efficiently was it operated? How effectively was it operated?
Yeah.
And therefore, people come and it's constructing. The use to which the facilities are put are not of no concern to the electorate. Even, especially the fourth estate. The fourth estate hardly follows through anything.
Very true. Very, very true. We allow the days and the politicians to determine the direction. So today, if an issue comes up, instead of us following it to its logical conclusion, the next moment the politician brings up something new and we forget about the old one, and it compiles and accrues, and it hits us the hardest. Doc, you have been a man of action, and that is one thing I admire you for. Man of your words. You took me by surprise when some time back you gave a deadline or a timeline and said that I'm going to fix this. If I don't fix it, this is what will happen, or this is what I will do. You are a man of your words, no two ways about that. And you are very proactive also. Maybe others may argue, but if you ask me, this past 6 months, all that I have been hearing from the energy minister seems to be complaints and telling me the problems we all know already. No two ways, we have serious problems at the energy sector. $2.5 billion US. Practically, and with a timeline, how would you have resolved this or led us to resolve it as a country?
You are putting me to an impossible position. And you see, how do I answer this question without being seen to be indicting appointing authority?
I know, but that's not the intention.
The minister had a baptism of fire. I believe he would make progress.
Let me rephrase the question for it to be very comfortable for all of us. Doc, how do you think Ghana can get out of this $2.5 billion energy crisis?
Thank you. This time it's about Ghana.
Exactly.
It's about all of us as a collective.
Very true.
First of all, we must take a second look at our institutional arrangement. If we have to dismantle some institutions to reconstruct, we have to do it.
Which of the institutions do you think that we need to dismantle and reconstruct?
ECG is the #1 institution. Our regulatory bodies, PURC and Energy Commission.
To be merged, because I really like that proposal.
Yes. To be streamlined.
Yeah.
merged and streamlined.
Yeah.
Then 3, our enforcement environment. Look, in most serious jurisdictions, you need a building permit.
Yeah.
In some jurisdictions, to even install an air conditioner in your house, you need permit of the council. Why do they do this? It provides utility providers data, information to project growth. So if 10 houses are coming up in this area, because you have permits have been issued, and that is why even the design of the houses have to be approved. So ECJ is informed, have a copy.
Right.
So they know 10 houses are coming. On the average, each house will add this much more to power consumption.
Exactly.
And therefore, we plan for it. The houses may take about 3 years to complete. So by the 3rd year, if we have one transformer here, we either have to expand, bring a bigger transformer, or add another one. So it enables planning. We absolutely refuse to do that in this country.
It's true.
So overnight, an area suddenly is up, is doubled, new houses, new structures, and the infrastructure is overwhelmed because there's no planning.
Yeah.
So our local government institutions, district assemblies, municipal, metropolitan, must crack the whip on compliance.
Yeah.
If you don't have a building permit and you are building, they should pull it down.
Pull it down. No two ways about that.
Other than that, the service providers will always be chasing new growth, of which they are not notified.
Right.
So we have a role to play. So our regulatory bodies must exact compliance.
So institutional arrangements needs to be looked at.
Seriously.
The ECG, then, PRC, and the rest.
And then punitive regimes.
All right.
Punitive regimes for lawbreakers, whether human persons or legal persons. If, look, in Togo and Cote d'Ivoire, if you are caught stealing power, the penalty is such that it's so dire that the next person will not even attempt.
Interesting. Unfortunately, it's not like that.
It's not like that.
It's free for all. It's quite an unfortunate one. Doc, your very final words on the energy sector.
It can. I believe we can fix the situation. It will need the collective efforts of Ghanaian and Ghanaian institutions. It will need some boldness. It will need some unpleasant decisions to be taken and implemented. And it will need passion.
Right.
Passion. And let us not leave the burden on the minister alone.
Let us not leave the burden on the minister alone, even though the minister is supposed to be our leader. But of course, you don't leave the burden on the leader alone. You, the follower, you also have a part to play. But to us, the consumers, I think, just like Doc said, legitimate consumers or legally accepted consumers, it is so unfair, the kind of burden we are being, made to go through. And I believe strongly with the proposals given by Doc, the hope is that the appropriate authorities, the energy ministry, the government, let's see how we can implement these proposals or some of these proposals to ensure that that burden is taken away from the legitimate consumers of power or electricity in this country. The other thing, which got my attention so much, has to do with those of you working especially with ECG, who aids illegality to take place, where you refuse or you fail to appreciate the fact that whatever you are taking, whether 2,000, 3,000 to 8, it ends up coming to bite us the biggest in the very near future. And that is where we are now, $2.5 billion. You are part of it. And it is now an albatross on all of us, our neck, even as a country. Let us not continue this tangent. It is time for us to do significant and serious reforms. Institutional arrangement. It is very, very, very important. And I believe strongly that as we continue with this conversation, in the very, very near future, very soon, we will see some positives as far as Ghana's energy sector is concerned. And we will not leave, even if we are not able to leave revenue for our next generation, we will not leave them debts. Let's see how we can correct this and not repeat it again. Doc, thank you so much for making time. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. And I believe my viewers are so happy that we've had this opportunity. I'm sure very soon we'll be having another conversation with you again. And I pray that when the time is up, you'll be available as you've always been doing. Thank you so much. Viewers, all too soon, this is where time will allow us till we meet again next week. I'm still your host, Emmanuel Wilson Jr., and we've had this insightful conversation with Dr. Kwabena Donkor. Clearly, he needs no introduction, particularly when it comes to the energy sector in this country, or when it comes to even the energy sector. Till we meet again next week, same time. All I can say for now is good night.